Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was off when I walked into the server room and found a post-it note stuck to the firewall. Don't touch Aiden's orders. That's like finding a handwritten label on a nuclear reactor that says lol, it's fine. A week later, half our infrastructure looked like it had been duct taped by a raccoon with a Red Bull addiction. And who did they call to fix it? Good ol' Betty. Always Betty. The compliance ghoul. The cyber janitor. Woman with a bad knee and a binder full of worst-case scenarios no one ever wanted to read. 12 years at Parallax Systems, and I was still getting "can you just take a quick look?" dropped in my inbox like cursed pennies in a wishing well. Except what I looked at was the difference between a $200 million cyber insurance payout and total corporate death. Not that anyone noticed, until they did. But we'll get there. Right now, I was running patches on our legacy endpoint network. Slow, grimy work with all the joy of brushing your teeth with sandpaper. Every week, a new threat. Every patch, a new exemption to log. You had to know which ones conflicted with what, which sequence mattered, and when to trigger the hardening cycle so nothing got locked out. It was a dance, and I was the only one still hearing the music. Everyone else was too busy screaming about quarterly targets or prepping for another reorg. I used to joke with the old CEO, Walter, that someday they'd find me fossilized in the server room like a grumpy cyber mummy, still clutching my clipboard and muttering about verifiable audit trails. Walter got it. He was old school. He knew the devil lives in the footnotes, especially in the fine print of our cyber insurance policy. Page 42, Section D. Clause 5.7. Active policy coverage contingent upon continuous compliance logging and verified endpoint hardening completed by credentialed administrator. That credentialed administrator was me. Still is, technically. But back then, nobody cared. Least of all Walter's flavor of the month interim COO, his nephew Aiden. But we're not there yet. Anyway, before we go any further down this backdoor hell rabbit hole, can I just say, if you've made it this far and you're one of the 93% listening without subscribing, now's the time. Go on, hit that button. Smash that like too. It keeps this weird little tribe of us going. The team behind these stories, they're running on caffeine, heartbreak, and that sweet dopamine hit of validation. Don't let them starve. Where were we? Oh, right, Betty. Background noise in her own life. That was me. They didn't see the difference between patching and poking a bear. The system looked fine, so it was fine, until it wasn't. Until it bit. My days were routine. I logged in before sunrise, scheduled patches, confirmed endpoint rollouts, and updated compliance sheets like I was prepping for the apocalypse, which, in corporate cybersecurity, is never more than one bad click away. Half the company thought I just did IT stuff, like resetting passwords and scowling at USB drives. What I actually did was babysit a patching architecture with the stability of a Jenga tower in an earthquake. If even one node failed mid-sequence, it could leave an open port so exposed it might as well be wearing fishnets and a sign that said "hack me." But nobody cared about the sequence or the protocols or the logs until I brought it up. Then suddenly I was overthinking it, slowing things down, or my personal favorite, trying to stay relevant. Still, Walter respected the work. He'd check in once a week, usually with a half-burnt bagel and a story about how someone at his country club got hacked and blamed it on 5G signals in the walls. He let me do my job, trusted me. He knew I wasn't some paranoid freak. I was the wall between us and the void. And then he stepped down. No press release. No ceremony. Just a Slack message that said, "Time to golf more. Nephew's taking over ops. Be nice." Aiden blew in like a cologne bomb in a trench coat. Shiny teeth. MBA swagger. All flash, no firewall. His first act as interim COO, cancel the weekly risk briefings. Said they were killing momentum. His second act, strip endpoint security out of the roadmap and replace it with something he called adaptive security light. I asked what the hell that meant. He said, "It means we move fast and trust each other." Been in compliance long enough to know that anyone who says trust more than once in a meeting is either about to lie or already has. Still, I kept patching, kept documenting, kept logging. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this line of work, it's this: the breach always comes after they stop listening. Aiden arrived at Parallax Systems like someone had dropped a can of Axe body spray into a server fan, loud, obnoxious, and absolutely everywhere at once. Within 48 hours, he'd managed to insult the IT lead, rename the biweekly system sync to Ops Momentum Blast, and replace the department's quiet coffee corner with a branded smoothie bar that only served kale sludge and coconut protein. He was the kind of guy who called himself a serial optimizer and thought NDAs were vibe killers. His LinkedIn headline read, "Shattering Silos. Building Rocket Ships." I preferred the more honest subtitle I gave him, "Nepotism, Now in Human Form." The Monday after Walter stepped down, Aiden strutted into the all-hands with a Bluetooth headset wedged in his ear like it was surgically implanted. "We're entering a new phase," he declared, "and I want us operating like a disruptor, not a dinosaur. Agility over procedure. Momentum over paranoia." I was standing by the coffee machine, sipping a mug that said documentation is not optional, and watched him laser pointer his way through a canvas-lapped presentation called New Ops, New Energy. He clicked past a slide that said Legacy Load Audit, and I felt my stomach twist. That's corp speak for find old people to fire. Betty's team will be sunsetting manual review processes and shifting toward more intuitive frameworks, Aiden announced without so much as glancing at me. Gonna lean into risk resilience, like human firewalls. It took everything in me not to snort coffee out my nose. Human firewalls. The man had the cybersecurity expertise of a toaster. That afternoon, I was yanked from the change control calendar. No more standing update meetings. No more patch logs routed through me. Instead, I was repurposed into a so-called compliance advisory lane, which, in Aiden speak, and sit quietly and don't touch anything important. He started calling me legacy load in passing. Once, in the hallway, I heard him joke to another exec, "Betty's got more red tape than a Christmas crime scene." I went home that night and opened a private encrypted drive I hadn't touched in years. Started backing things up. Patch reports, exemption notes, risk alerts, every single compliance clause tied to our cyber insurance policy. I labeled it Fire Drill Kit. Just in case. What pissed me off most wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't even the job erosion. It was how easily everyone went along with it. The CTO gave a weak little shrug and said, "We'll give Aiden room to run." The head of HR, a walking J.C. Penney mannequin, nodded and said, "It's important to modernize our tone." Tone? The only tone I cared about was the screaming silence in our patching logs. 2 weeks in, real kicker dropped. I tried to log into the endpoint manager to prep a routine sequence. Access denied. I checked again. Still denied. Aiden had quietly reassigned all remote admin controls to a DevOps contractor who looked like he got his credentials from a cereal box. I raised it, of course, politely. In writing, his response, "We've centralized ops for efficiency. You'll get read-only access soon." Without full access, I typed back, "Can't confirm patch rollouts or finalize the compliance logs tied to our cyber insurance clause 5.7. He replied with a waving hand emoji and the words, "Don't overthink it. We're in safe hands now." I stared at that message for a solid minute. Then I screenshotted it, printed it, filed it under liability theater. The next day, he pulled me aside after a team check-in. "Hey, quick thing," he said, all teeth and fake empathy. "Been kinda heavy on the whole risk management vibe lately. It's freaking people out." I blinked. "Freaking people out?" "Yeah, the constant logs this, threat vector that. It's like fear-mongering. We're building a culture of trust. I don't trust anyone who disables logs," I said flatly. He laughed like I'd told a joke and walked off. I stood there, gripping my notepad so hard I almost cracked the spine. That night, I added more to the fire drill kit. Server logs, meeting recordings, my own memos, a copy of the cyber insurance contract annotated with sticky notes and red ink like I was preparing for court. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for fallout, because I'd seen this movie before, and it never ends with the tech lady getting a raise. It ends with her holding the receipts while the building burns. The breach didn't begin with a hacker. It began with a shrug. It was a Wednesday. I remember because the cafeteria was pushing something called power protein pudding, and Aiden had declared it peak fuel while spooning it down like a toddler high on CrossFit. I was midway through a critical endpoint patch cycle, one of those gnarly ones that required precise sequencing across 12 regional servers. The kind of patch that, if interrupted, leaves more holes than a block of Swiss cheese used for target practice. I flagged it, logged it, sent the usual protocol note to DevOps. "Do not interrupt this cycle." Estimated completion, 4:45 p.m., logs attached. At 3:17 p.m., the alerts started blinking. Remote sessions terminated. Admin access revoked. My dashboard dead, like someone had reached through the wires and yanked the plug out of my spine. I grabbed my personal phone and called Jeremy in IT. Hey, I just got booted. Did the patch cycle fail? There was a long pause, followed by a soft, embarrassed cough. Yeah, Aiden said to kill your VPN. Something about risk overreaction. He did it mid-meeting. I stared at the wall like it had just confessed to a murder. Jeremy, I said slowly, did you terminate access before the hardening process completed? He said to pull it immediately. Jesus Christ, I didn't yell, didn't scream. Just sat there for a moment, hands folded, watching our 12-region patch go up in digital flames. The hardening process had been interrupted. The system was now frozen in a half-patch state, open ports unlogged, endpoint lockdowns unfinished, a backdoor wide enough for a toddler to crawl through. This wasn't a warning shot. This was arson. At 3:25 p.m., I opened my compliance terminal on a personal air-gapped machine I kept for situations exactly like this. I drafted a memo, not an emotional one, not a plea, a record, just the facts, bulletproof. 2. Legal at Parallaxes.com CC. Risk management at Parallaxes.com subject. Unauthorized termination of remote access security integrity compromised timestamp. WED, 3:25 p.m. at 3:17 p.m. today. Moat admin access associated with patch cycle hash ER5407 was forcibly terminated via unauthorized administrative override. As a result, system hardening procedures were interrupted mid-sequence, leaving critical endpoints in an unsecured state. Previous warnings regarding the necessity of uninterrupted sequencing were documented and ignored. Logs, protocols, and screenshots attached for formal review. This event may compromise policy compliance under Clause 5.7 of our Cyber Insurance Agreement. E. Barrett, SR. Compliance Ops. I didn't bother sending it to Aiden. Let him find out the way everyone else would when the fuse met the powder. At 3:41 p.m., I uploaded a backup of the patch logs and termination timestamps to the compliance vault, digitally signed and version locked, the kind of backup that could survive a nuclear winter and an HR smear campaign, the kind that holds up in court. At 4:05 p.m., Aiden pinged me in Slack. Aiden, COO interim. Yo, we good now? Heard something went weird with your login, but Jeremy fixed it. We're streamlining access going forward. No need to panic. I didn't respond. At 4:11 p.m., printed out a copy of the memo and slid it into the manila folder marked in case of idiots. Then I went home. I sat on the porch that night with a glass of bourbon and a cat that wasn't mine but showed up sometimes like it was checking on me. I stared at the dark sky and listened to the silence in my phone. No apologies, no reversals, just quiet. The kind of quiet you get before a storm starts ripping the roof off. Let them laugh. Let them call me legacy load. Let them say I was overreacting. I wasn't mad. I was cold. And cold people don't scream. They write memos that leave scars. The thing about being erased is it never happens all at once. It's not some dramatic you're fired with your nameplate hurled into a recycling bin. No, it's a slow fade. A quiet suffocation by omission. My badge still opened the door, but it may as well have opened a mausoleum. They didn't disable me, just diluted me. No more invites. No stand-ups. No access to the Slack channels I created. I found out about system updates from hallway gossip and the sound of unfamiliar voices laughing inside rooms I used to command. I became a ghost in my own infrastructure, haunting machines I once kept alive. I'd walk past glass conference rooms and see my job performed by what looked like a cast of unpaid interns from a bad tech drama. One kid was using Google Docs to manage patch rotations. Another had 6 browser tabs open to chat GPT, asking how to force reboot regional servers without tripping failover protocols. Let me tell you something. If your patch policy starts with according to Reddit, your company's already on fire. But Aiden didn't care. In fact, he was thriving. He renamed the server dashboard to Agile Armor Suite and branded his new Team Ops Vanguards. Wore matching hoodies. At one point, they held a Security Spirit Week where everyone dressed as their favorite firewall. Someone came in wrapped in printer paper labeled Norton 2003. It got a standing ovation. I walked through it all like a fossil, not angry, not even shocked anymore, just hollow. The betrayal wasn't the exclusion, it was the recklessness. The fact that they knew the stakes, that I'd told them the cost, and still played Minecraft with our backbone systems like nothing mattered beyond their dashboards and dopamine hits. So I did the one thing that still gave me control. I watched. Every change, every misstep, every protocol skipped or rule bent in the name of agility. I watched them reroute secure update ports to public testing environments because it's faster. I watched them skip version logging because it's clutter. I watched them brag in Slack about shaving deployment time by cutting out all the Betty crap. Fine. You want a world without Betty? Enjoy it. At night, I logged into my secure compliance terminal, air-gapped, password-locked, fingerprint verified, the one no one knew existed except Walter and me. It wasn't connected to the cloud, wasn't part of the company network, and wasn't subject to their revisionist IT policies. It was where I kept the truth, backed up everything. Every admin override, every failed sequence, every policy deviation. I screen-capped Slack threads, downloaded access logs, tracked who had touched which servers when, and which ones they shouldn't have. I compiled time-stamped files, labeled each incident, tied it to the corresponding insurance clause, and stored it in the compliance vault under my credentials. Credentials that, thanks to an oversight in Aiden's streamlining, he hadn't revoked. I tagged one particular sequence project ghost. Fitting, really. There was a moment, brief, petty, shamefully satisfying, when I passed by the new lead on the patch team. He looked at me like a man who knew he was juggling knives while blindfolded. His hands shook when he typed. The guy was good at buzzwords, but bad at rollback protocols. I watched him run a hotfix directly into production without testing it in staging. I didn't say a word. They made their bed. It was just collecting evidence of the splinters. Even HR went radio silent. The same woman who used to loop me into policy reviews now walked past me like I was contagious. I caught her whispering once, "Betty's still here?" Like I'd faked my own death but forgot to leave. Yes, I was still here, still listening, still archiving, still watching every line of this circus tighten its noose. There's a kind of power in being forgotten. They think you're gone. They stop hiding. And when they stop hiding, they get sloppy. And sloppy leaves fingerprints. I wasn't plotting revenge, not yet, but I was building a file. And every day they ignored me, the file got thicker. Aiden had taken to calling himself a transformation catalyst, said it in every meeting, wore it like cologne, stank up the whole floor with it. By the time Q3 Investor Week rolled around, was bouncing between pitch calls like a Labrador in a necktie. We've streamlined ops by 37%, he told one group of venture capitalists. Legacy bottlenecks eliminated. Our risk posture is fluid and adaptive. He said that last part while pointing at a slide that showed a bar graph labeled security incidents reduced since role optimization. The implication was that getting rid of me, well, ghosting me, had somehow made the company safer. The slide didn't show were the silent failures. The backdoors left swinging open. The audit logs full of gaps wide enough to drive a ransomware truck through. But investors don't care about footnotes. They care about story. And Aiden told a damn good fairy tale. The CTO, bless his tired soul, tried to interject during one call. Said something vague like, "We may need to revisit some aspects of our compliance framework." Aiden waved him off. Already handled. Decentralized control and empowered frontline innovation. Which is a fancy way of saying, we gave the interns admin rights and told Betty to eat dirt. I sat 3 desks away during all of this, watching my name vanish from org charts like I was a typo. No one said anything directly, but you start to feel it. The way people don't look you in the eye. The way meetings get moved, and somehow you're the only one without the new Zoom link. Then the whispers started. Roles being repurposed. I heard she's going part-time. Isn't she just like documentation or something? It wasn't malice, just rot. Organizational rot where memory dies and the mold starts smiling. I didn't argue. I didn't plead my case. I took a week of PTO. Just typed the request, clicked submit, and walked out with my usual thermos and a file folder labeled Archive B. I spent that week not at home, not on a beach, but across the river in a beige office with my outside counsel, a woman named Maya, who used to work in federal enforcement. The kind of attorney who could weaponize timestamps like sniper rounds. We sat for hours, cross-referencing logs, correlating VPN disconnects with patch failures, aligning policy deviations with clause language from the insurance contract. We built a war chest of documentation, including every single incident that could be tied to noncompliance. You realize what this is, she said, leafing through the 4th binder. This isn't just a mess. This is a breach in waiting. I nodded. They think if they don't say the word, it won't happen. She smiled without humor. They're gonna say it eventually. Problem is, when they do, it's already too late. Organize the files into 4 categories. Procedural negligence every time Aiden overrode policy for efficiency. Credential mismanagement, the handoffs to untrained juniors without oversight. Security log gaps timestamps showing where patch cycles failed. Insurance disqualification triggers every instance breaching clause 5.7. We added screenshots, Slack threads, memos. We didn't write a narrative, just the facts. Cold and clinical. Let the story tell itself. Maya drafted an affidavit and filed it under her firm's secure escrow. This is your trigger document, she told me. You ever get terminated or a breach goes public, I can launch this in 60 seconds. I walked out of her office lighter than I'd felt in months. Not happy, not smug, just ready. The day I returned to Parallax, nobody even said welcome back. My desk was untouched. My badge still beeped. My name was still in the directory, buried under other compliance legacy. And the ops team, they were busy celebrating incident-free week hash 4 with catered sandwiches and kombucha shots. They had no idea the storm was already on the radar. They just couldn't read the coordinates. But I could, and I knew exactly where it would land. The call was already circling the drain when the auditor unmuted. It started like all quarterly investor briefings do, slick, soulless, heavy on buzzwords. Aiden led the charge, of course, wearing some designer polo with the collar pre-wrinkled like he paid extra for artisanal casual. The investor slides were filled with pie charts and heat maps no one actually reads. Words like synergistic workflows, penetration-resistant architecture, and my personal favorite, zero-day proof endpoint ecosystem. I sat at my kitchen table in silence, one earbud in, sipping cold coffee with a grim little smile. My name wasn't on the invite. I wasn't supposed to be there. But I had access to the overflow call link. Oversight on their end. Gift on mine. Aiden was mid-ramble about post-legacy systems optimization when it happened. Excuse me, the voice came from the auditor. Calm, flat, no emotion, just scalpel precision. Everyone shut up instantly. Need to pause the presentation to address a situation that's just been validated by our external monitoring partner. You could feel the shift. The air dropped 10 degrees through a conference line. Chairs squeaked. Someone on the call coughed. There has been a confirmed breach. Aiden blinked. Can you clarify what you mean by breach? Like attempted or no, the auditor said, cutting him off. Confirmed. Penetration of sensitive infrastructure through an unpatched access node originated 3 weeks ago. Data exfiltration began approximately 72 hours later. It went undetected until this morning. Silence. Then, we believe the point of entry correlates with administrative changes logged during a known patch cycle failure. I nearly dropped my mug, not from surprise, from how precise the phrasing was. Administrative changes. Patch cycle failure. They'd done the homework. Someone had found the timestamp, which meant someone had also found my memo. I could imagine Aiden's face, going from fake calm to fish gasp panic in real time, probably scanning the room like the walls were suddenly watching him. The CTO broke the silence. His voice was soft. Which access node was the point of failure? The auditor didn't miss a beat. Node 6B, the sequence that failed to complete due to remote access termination. My heart kicked once. 6B was mine, the patch cycle they'd yanked me out of midstream, the one I warned them about, the one I wrote the memo for and filed with legal and risk, the exact one tied to our cyber insurance compliance clause. And that's when the next gut punch came. We've reviewed your insurance coverage, the auditor continued. Clause 5.7 stipulates continuous verified compliance, logging, as a prerequisite for breach coverage, because your security logs for Node 6B were incomplete, and the cycle was not formally documented by a credentialed administrator. The clause has been invalidated. Another pause. Deeper this time. Dread thick enough to chew. So you're saying, Aiden croaked, the policy is void? Yes, the auditor said. Your $200 million breach coverage is nullified under the terms of the agreement. I sat back in my chair, eyes closed, heart pounding like a slow drum. Validation is a strange flavor. It doesn't taste like triumph. It tastes like smoke, like you saw the fire coming, yelled until your throat bled, then watched everyone sit back and toast marshmallows anyway. They had let this happen. Aiden, in his infinite arrogance, had pulled the plug on my access mid-cycle because it bruised his ego to have an old compliance hag like me still calling shots. And now Now his ego had a body count. I knew this moment would come. Didn't know when, but I knew. That's why the logs were backed up. That's why the memo existed. That's why Maya had everything time-stamped, mirrored, and sitting in escrow. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to say a damn word. The facts were speaking for themselves now, louder than any scolding I could ever give. I pulled up the call transcript in real time, saved it, and quietly added it to the Project Ghost archive. Let them sweat. The reckoning wasn't over, it was just beginning. By the time the call ended, Parallax was in full freefall mode. You could feel the tremors even through the corporate Slack channels. Threads vanished. Admin accounts went dark. Calendars cleared themselves like they were trying to cover their tracks. Someone triggered system triage mode, which hadn't been used since that one time an intern bricked a firewall by trying to mine crypto on the HR server. IT was scrambling. I mean sprinting. I watched from my compliance terminal as a flurry of login attempts hit my old admin panel, desperate dives into access history, patch records, node logs. I could practically hear the collective gasping from tech leads who had never even read the insurance clause until that very moment. And then it happened. 3:42 p.m. Access logs show a redline event. Termination of VPN. User Eberett timestamp. Mid-cycle someone in infrastructure finally put 2 and 2 together. She was off the system before the patch completed. 5 seconds later, legal pinged risk. Then risk pinged audit. Then audit pinged everyone with a VP title and less than 2 working brain cells between them. And finally, someone pulled my final warning memo from the vault. The one I sent 6 weeks ago, and with the subject line, urgent patch cycle at risk, admin override will trigger clause breach. It was still there, untouched, time-stamped, with 3 attachments, a full breakdown of the patch sequence, screenshots of the admin panel mid-cycle, a Slack transcript showing Aiden ordering IT to kill my VPN. Legal opened it, read it, and I imagine, for the first time in this whole soap opera, understood just how deep the hole really was. At 3:56 p.m., I got an email. Short, terse. Subject, clarification needed security incident review from Chief Legal Officer to Eberett at Parallaxes Betty. We are reviewing internal administrative records tied to the recent incident. Would you be available for a short call to clarify the timeline and your documentation? Clarify. They always use soft words when the world is on fire. Clarify is code for please don't sue us yet. I didn't respond, not right away. Instead, I opened the Project Ghost archive and checked the timestamp on the memo again. Every line intact, every dot connected. A perfect digital time capsule of ignored warnings and weaponized arrogance. The real kicker. While legal was sifting through ashes, Aiden had gone radio silent. Not a peep from his end of the Slack galaxy. The man who never shut up about radical transparency was now apparently allergic to communication. Meanwhile, investor threads lit up. I wasn't on those calls, but I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before. One question, whispered like a guillotine rope fraying, who made the decision to revoke her access. They weren't asking about the breach anymore. They were asking about the trigger, the cause. The moment the $200 million rug got yanked out from under them, and every log pointed one way, straight to Aiden. I got a second message an hour later. This one not from legal, the CEO's office. The board would like to request your presence for a private discussion regarding the breach response and recovery plan. You may bring counsel if you wish. Translation: they'd finally realized the ghost in their system wasn't dead. She was just watching. And now she was coming back. Not for applause, not for vengeance, for clarity. And maybe, if they were lucky, for containment. The next morning, the office smelled like panic, thin, cold, metallic. The air before a lightning strike. Word traveled fast. Not loud, but surgical. Whisper chain shattered. No more behind-the-scenes damage control. No more waiting for things to blow over. This wasn't a storm on the horizon anymore. It was already in the building. I walked in just before 9, badge still active, passcode still valid. It was the first time in weeks anyone made eye contact with me. Not out of kindness, out of survival instinct. Kind of look you give someone who might hold the last parachute on a crashing plane. By 9:30, Aiden tried to run damage control. He called a quick meeting in the executive lounge. Just the C-suite and a few select VPs, people he thought he still had in his pocket. He stood in front of them, whiteboard marker in hand, trying to make the breach sound like a relic's fault. This is what happens when you rely on outdated infrastructure, he said, drawing a big sad circle labeled legacy systems. The compliance model Betty was using was built for 2012. Static, inflexible. That's why it couldn't keep up. That's the real problem here. The CTO finally snapped. Bull, he said flatly, cutting him off mid-sentence. Don't insult our intelligence. Aiden blinked. Excuse me? You pulled her VPN during a live patch cycle. She warned you. She logged it. She followed protocol. The logs show it. Memo shows it. I reviewed the whole chain last night. You ignored every red flag because you wanted cleaner optics for your investor pitch. Silence. You could have heard a dollar bill hit the floor. Then came the real hit. The lead investor, who just happened to be the CEO's older brother, had been watching all of this unfold from his private terminal, surrounded by a small team of outside legal advisors. Heard later he didn't say a word until the CTO forwarded him Betty's memo directly. Time-stamped. Detailed. Flawless. He didn't yell. Didn't demand an emergency call. He simply added one item to the company-wide calendar. All hands emergency session, 12 o'clock p.m. mandatory attendance. When that appeared, a ripple went through the office like a sonic boom. You know, the kind of silence that says someone's already being measured for their fall? That. Aiden tried to spin it. Sent out a Slack message about radical realignment and cross-functional transparency in post-incident review. No one responded. By 11 o'clock, the CEO's brother arrived in the building. First time in person since Walter stepped down. No entourage, no handshake tour. Just a look on his face like the floor might catch fire if it dared lie to him. HR canceled all 1-1s. Finance locked its systems. Security posted near the elevators. And legal, they walked in carrying binders. Real, physical binders. That's when you know the knives are out. I sat 2 rows from the front when the board filed in. No nameplates, no fanfare. Just the quiet weight of accountability finally catching up to arrogance. Aiden stood near the back, arms crossed, trying to fake calm with a twitching jaw. When the lead investor took the mic, he didn't start with a welcome or agenda. Simply said, we have identified the origin of the failure and the individual responsible. Then he looked straight at Aiden. Didn't say the name, didn't have to. Everyone in that room already knew. The investor call reconvened at 2 o'clock p.m. sharp. No preamble, no soft reset. Just that brutal silence you only hear when very rich men realize they've been made very stupid. There were 22 people on the line, not counting silent observers. VCs, institutional partners, legal counsel, a few high-stakes board members dialing in from yachts and panic rooms probably. Aiden was on camera now, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up like some poor man's Tony Stark. His hair, once perfectly product laminated, looked like it had been through a blender. The lead investor, Walter's brother, Gerald, sat in a stark room with no background, no blur filter. Just a plain white wall and a closed laptop in front of him. No distractions, no tech glamour. He was already halfway through the execution before anyone spoke. He leaned into the mic, voice calm, dead calm. Who, he asked, just lit my money on fire? No one answered, not right away. Then slowly the camera shifted toward Aiden, not by instruction, just organically, like the entire digital room turned its head at once. Aiden opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced to his left toward legal. VP of Compliance, newly installed, temporarily, cleared her throat. Her hands were shaking. We've reviewed the logs, she said carefully. The patch cycle that failed was interrupted manually. VPN access for the administrator, Betty Barrett, was terminated mid-process. That action originated from a command string logged under interim COO credentials. Specifically, she hesitated, then finished. Aiden Frost. No spin, no qualifiers, just the name. Gerald didn't flinch. He turned a page in the folder in front of him, and that termination led to a failure in endpoint hardening, which created a backdoor, which was exploited. And because the final security review was never documented by the credentialed admin, Clause 5.7 of the insurance agreement was voided. That is correct, legal said. We lost the $200 million coverage. Another pause. Gerald tapped the desk once. Loud, flat, turned to the CEO, who looked like he was aging in real time. We're executing a clause of our own. Immediate executive reorganization. Interim COO privileges are revoked. Aiden Frost is to be removed from company systems and escorted off the premises by security. Nobody moved. Then HR stood up. The head of security followed. Aiden let out a small, shocked laugh. Wait, no, this is being blown out of proportion. I was told Betty's access was outdated. She was undermining the chain of command. She, Betty, Gerald said, cutting him off, documented everything. We reviewed the memo, the screenshots, the Slack transcripts. She followed protocol. You ignored it. Aiden froze. You weren't just incompetent, Gerald said quietly. You were negligent, with other people's money. Two security officers stepped forward. One of them, Carl, ex-military, kind eyes, terrifying wrists, gave Aiden a nod that wasn't a suggestion. Aiden didn't resist. He just looked around, dazed, like the room had flipped upside down. When he passed me on the way to the elevator, I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't say a word. I just stood up, shoulders back, and nodded. Slight, precise, like the click of a vault locking shut, because that's what this was, not revenge, not catharsis. Just the quiet revenge of being right and still standing. Reinstated me that afternoon. No speech, no flowers, just a direct report to the board and full access restored. My office had been repainted some soulless startup gray, but the bones were still mine. I reopened my terminal, typed in my old credentials, logged back into the system I never stopped protecting. And I whispered, to no one in particular, let's patch some damn endpoints. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.